3:17 in the afternoon. A mother named Ruth stood in her kitchen in New London, Texas, when the windows of her house suddenly rattled as though something enormous had slammed into the earth itself. She stepped outside and saw a towering column of black smoke rising into the March sky from the one building in town that mattered more than any other. Her son was inside. For one impossible second, she couldn't make sense of what she was seeing. The smoke was too thick, too close. Then instinct took over. She dropped everything and ran toward the school. In that same heartbeat, dozens of other parents across town felt the same violent tremor beneath their feet. They abandoned whatever they were doing and began running in the same direction, each gripped by the same terrifying thought. In less than 60 seconds, one of the largest, wealthiest, and most modern school buildings in rural America had been reduced to a mountain of shattered concrete and twisted steel, with hundreds of children trapped beneath the rubble. Nearly 300 people would never come home. It remains, to this day, one of the deadliest school disasters in American history. And yet, outside of Texas, almost no one has ever heard its name. This is the story of the New London school explosion, a tragedy fueled by oil money, an invisible killer, and one unthinkable mistake that no one saw coming. It's the story of a small town that lost an entire generation in a single afternoon, and of a disaster that forever changed the way America thinks about safety. Before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe. These are the forgotten stories that deserve to be remembered, the moments that shaped American history, but somehow slipped from our collective memory. To understand why March 18, 1937, became one of the darkest days in American history, you first have to understand why New London, Texas, felt, in the years leading up to it, like the luckiest town in the country. New London sat in the heart of the East Texas oil field, one of the largest oil discoveries the United States had ever seen. Almost overnight, the region had transformed from quiet farmland into one of the richest oil-producing areas on Earth. Wells rose out of the ground everywhere, beside churches, behind homes, even on school property. Families who had scraped by for generations suddenly found themselves living on top of extraordinary wealth. The town poured that wealth into one symbol above all others: its school. The New London School District became so flush with oil royalties that it built a campus almost unheard of for a rural community. A sprawling, modern facility that served over 1,000 students, with resources that made it the envy of school districts across the entire state. Locals often bragged that their school district had more money per student than nearly any other in the country. Parents who had grown up without shoes were now sending their children to a school with amenities that rivaled colleges. It was a source of enormous pride. The building represented everything the oil boom had given this community: proof that hard, dangerous work in the oil fields could finally buy their children a better life than the one their parents had known. But there was something else the oil boom had given the town, something nobody thought much about at the time, something invisible, odorless, and waiting quietly beneath the very floors those children walked across every day. To save money on heating costs, the school had made a decision that seemed practical, even clever at the time. Instead of paying for a metered supply of natural gas, the school tapped directly into a residue gas line connected to a nearby oil company. Gas that was, at the time, considered a byproduct with little commercial value and was essentially free for anyone willing to run a line to it. It was a common practice across the oil field. Homes did it. Businesses did it. Nobody saw anything wrong with it. There was just one problem. That gas was completely undetectable. It had no odor, no color, no warning sign of any kind if it began leaking into an enclosed space. And underneath the New London School, for an unknown period of time, it had been leaking. In the weeks and months before the explosion, there were small signs that something was wrong. The kind of signs that, in hindsight, feel almost unbearable to look back on. Students and teachers had occasionally complained of headaches during the school day. Some described feeling unusually tired or dizzy in certain rooms, without ever understanding why. At the time, these complaints were dismissed as nothing more than the ordinary discomforts of schoolwork, allergies, or simply children being children. No one connected the symptoms to gas exposure because there was nothing to smell, nothing to see, nothing that fit the picture of danger that anyone in 1937 had been trained to recognize. The gas had been quietly seeping from a leak, likely originating in the crawl space beneath the school building, for what investigators later believed may have been days or even longer. It pooled in the enclosed space beneath the building's concrete foundation, filling the crawl space the way water fills the bottom of a container, with nowhere to escape and nothing to reveal its presence. March 18, 1937, was a Thursday, and it began like any other school day. It was also, by coincidence, that would later feel almost unbearably cruel, the day before spring break, meaning the building was filled not only with its usual students, but with an unusually large gathering. A parent-teacher association meeting, scheduled for later that evening, had drawn extra parents and community members onto the grounds throughout the afternoon. Inside one of the school's shop classrooms, an instructor switched on an electric sanding machine to prepare for the following period. It was an unremarkable action, the kind performed 1,000 times before, without incident. A simple plug, a simple switch, the ordinary sound of a machine coming to life. This time, it ignited the gas that had been silently filling the space beneath the building. The explosion tore through the school with a force that witnesses miles away compared to an earthquake. The blast lifted the massive roof of the building into the air before it collapsed downward, crushing the structure and everyone inside it, in what onlookers described as a matter of seconds. Inside the building were hundreds of children, ranging from the youngest elementary grades to teenagers just months from graduation, along with their teachers. Parents who had felt their homes shake ran toward the school from every direction, some driving, many simply sprinting on foot, arriving to find a scene that no one in that town would ever be able to fully describe afterward. A building they had once been proud to call the finest school in Texas, now reduced to a mountain of broken concrete and steel, with children trapped somewhere beneath it. Word spread through the East Texas oil fields within minutes, carried by phone lines and radio and simple human panic. Oil field workers, many of them fathers of children inside the school, dropped their tools and rushed to the site. Because this was oil country, heavy equipment was close at hand, and rescue efforts began almost immediately, with roughnecks and drillers using the same machinery meant for extracting oil to instead pull broken concrete off the bodies of children. News of the disaster reached far beyond Texas within hours. Reporters from across the country began making their way toward the small town, and one name soon appeared among the volunteers who arrived to help search the wreckage. Walter Cronkite, then a young wire service reporter, was among the journalists who covered the disaster early in his career, an assignment he would later describe as one of the most devastating he ever witnessed, one that stayed with him for the rest of his life. Rescue workers dug through the night and into the following day, working by lantern light after darkness fell, refusing to stop even as exhaustion set in, driven by the desperate hope of finding survivors beneath the rubble. Some children were pulled out alive, many were not. By the time the full scope of the tragedy became clear, close to 300 students and teachers had lost their lives. The exact number has never been definitively settled, in part because some families in the community reportedly took their deceased children home to bury quietly rather than have them counted in official tallies, a detail that still leaves historians without a perfectly precise final count to this day. It remains to this day the deadliest school disaster in American history. If you were watching this and had no idea this happened, you're not alone, and that's exactly the problem. Let us know in the comments where you're from and whether you'd ever heard of New London before today. In the days that followed, New London became a town defined by grief, on a scale almost impossible to comprehend for a community of its size. Nearly every family in town had lost a child, a sibling, a niece or nephew, or a close family friend. Funerals stretched across days, with cemeteries struggling to keep pace with the sheer number of burials required. Some parents, in the crushing weight of their grief, made the almost unbearable choice to leave town entirely, unable to remain in a place so thoroughly haunted by what had happened. Others stayed, determined to rebuild, driven by a mixture of grief and stubborn refusal to let the disaster erase their community completely. Investigators soon determined the cause: the odorless natural gas that had been leaking beneath the building, ignited by what was believed to be a simple electrical spark from that sanding machine in the shop classroom. The tragedy led directly to a change that would go on to save countless lives across the entire country. In the aftermath of the New London explosion, Texas lawmakers passed a requirement that natural gas be mixed with a distinctive, foul-smelling odor before being distributed for consumer use. The same practice, using a chemical compound called mercaptan, that gives natural gas its recognizable rotten egg smell today. Other states, and eventually much of the country, adopted similar requirements. That distinctive smell, one that almost every American recognizes instantly if a stove is left on or a gas leak occurs in their home, exists in large part because of the lesson learned in New London, Texas, at the cost of nearly 300 young lives. It is one of the most consequential, life-saving regulations in American history, and almost no one who benefits from it today knows where it came from. A memorial was eventually built on the site of the old school, and a new school was constructed nearby, one that the community insisted on completing, so that education in New London would continue, rather than be permanently defined by tragedy. Survivors carried the memory of that day for the rest of their lives, many rarely speaking about it publicly, the pain too immense to revisit easily, even decades later. For much of the 20th century, the New London school explosion existed largely as a regional memory, discussed in East Texas, but rarely taught in classrooms beyond it, overshadowed in the broader American narrative by the events of the following years. The outbreak of the Second World War just a few years later would consume the nation's attention, and a tragedy confined to one small Texas town slowly faded from the national conversation. But the consequences of that single afternoon never disappeared. Every time a family in America smells gas in their home and knows, instantly and instinctively, that something is wrong, they are relying on a safety measure written into law because of what happened in New London. Every time a school district reviews its safety protocols, or a state inspects gas lines running beneath a public building, there is a thread connecting back to March 18, 1937. It's a story about the price of overlooked warning signs, about a community that believed its greatest gift, the wealth pulled up from beneath its own soil, had made it safe, only to learn that the same ground could take everything away in a matter of seconds. It's also a story about resilience, about a small Texas town that buried an unbearable number of its children and still found the strength to rebuild a school and continue on. New London, Texas, is a place most Americans will never visit and most have never heard of. But the invisible smell of safety in every home with a gas line carries its memory forward, whether people realize it or not. If a story like this deserves to be remembered, it starts with people like you passing it on. Thank you for watching America Beyond Origins. If this story moved you, drop a comment and share your thoughts below. And if you want more forgotten American history like this, brought back into the light, like this video, subscribe, and stay for the next untold story.